let's talk about Russia's secret weapon in Ukraine, the Lancet drone. This is a drone that has 4 fins. There are different models, of course. They've got a smaller one that can be launched by itself, and they're building newer models by the day. Here you can see one that can be launched just out of a simple container like this, right? That one on the right can be launched by itself, and here they have another system for launching 4 at a time. Why is this so important? Why is this weapon changing the war in Russia's favor? You see, this war right now is being decided by 2 things: artillery and drones. I'm going to talk about artillery in a separate segment, which is another main reason why Ukraine is losing the war. This is so important because it's cheap to produce. One of these drones costs $35,000. Now, obviously, that's a lot of money. But if you compare that to the targets that it destroys, take a Bradley tank or another armored vehicle such as the Leopard, the German tank. These things cost millions of euros or dollars. With these exchange rates, not much difference anymore, right? $35,000 to destroy a tank that cost 11 million or 6 million. I mean, this is insane. This is insane. And when you were talking about a war of attrition, which is what this is a war of attrition, then everything comes down to saving money and producing as fast and as many artillery shells and drones as possible. And guess who is winning that fight? Take a look at what this drone can do. So you have one drone that's above, one unmanned aerial vehicle that is surveying, but the Lancet, you can see it from a first-person perspective. There's a camera right in the front. So, these things lock on to a target, and you can guide it as if, you're inside the drone. You see exactly what it sees, right? From the camera and the nose. Look at that. That tank cost millions to produce. Boom, gone. There, the ammunition is and the turret are going up in flames. Here's another one. There, that looks like a Bradley. Gone. You have S-300. So the S-300 is a very, very very good and sophisticated surface-to-air missile system developed by the Russians. It basically, it locks onto planes, and you can fire it, from a mobile vehicle, take it anywhere, fire it, and it will shoot down planes. Excellent. These things are so important to have. This drone, this Lancet drone, there's another video. You see it taking out 2 S-300s, gone like that, in the blink of an eye. I mean, I can't stress enough how vital these things are. I cannot stress enough. There's an excellent report here from a Russian station, and I thought we could look at it. It's a bit too long to watch all of it, but I'll just pick a part over here, and let's watch it together, because it's really impeccable. You can see here.
Оно и прижилось, и на самом
производство увеличилось аж в 50 раз. Точное количество не разглашается, но, как уверяют разработчики беспилотников, на каждый, даже еще не привезенный на Украину натовский танк уже
He's walking it like a dog.
припасено по несколько вот таких вот баражирующих боеприпасов.
Существует 2 разновидности ланцета – большой и маленький.
Это народное название ланцета. Оно и прижилось, и на самом деле как хирургический инструмент он всем понятен, да? Вот. Но это 2 изделия, да, они отличаются дальности, мощности боевой части, собственно. Но это 2 изделия, да, 51 и 52.
Какое изделие уничтожило «Леопард»?
Маленькое, как ни странно, знаете, самое маленькое. Самое маленькое оказалось, что оно...
Jesus. All this time, the Ukrainians and their lapdogs in Europe whining about, oh my God, we have to give them Bradleys, we have to give them Challengers and M1A2 Abrams, and we have to give them Leopard. What's the point? What's the point, man? You're missing the bigger picture here. This is exactly the mistake that the Germans made, that the Nazis made in World War II, right? No coincidence, I suppose, that the Russians end up fighting Nazis again, you know. During World War II, the Germans, they invested a lot of time and research into jet technology, right? So, incidentally, I'll talk about the V1 and the V2 in a second. But just to give you an analogy, the Tiger tank, you know, from an engineering viewpoint, beautiful machine, very, very good. You know, it's really kind of the blueprint for all modern tanks in a sense, because they all look like it, right? Not exactly, but very close. Tiger tank has an 88mm cannon, you know, enormous thing. You should use it to shoot down bloody planes, you know? Like no one even thought of doing such a crazy thing, putting an 88mm on a tank, and they did it. The problem is, though, it takes too long to train the crews. Does that sound familiar? Now you got all these Ukrainian units going off to Germany, months, you know, maybe if they're lucky, a few weeks, but I doubt it. You know, months to learn how to use Leopard tanks, or definitely months for F-16s, right? So it took too long to train the crews. When the tanks broke down, especially the first models, they would break down often. They had engine problems. It's difficult to repair. If you need replacement parts, they're expensive and they take time to produce. Meanwhile, the Russians are banging out these T-34s. Now, if you put them side by side, it's funny, right? A T-34 is tiny. You know, it's cheap in terms of production, right? It doesn't cost too much, and it's quick to produce. The Russians are making these things like they can't make enough of these goddamn tanks. They can't make enough. This is another problem with the Germans. They underestimated how much troops the Russians had and the might of their industry. So you have T-34s just overwhelming the Germans. They didn't even have time to make use of the Tiger tank or the King Tiger, and then of course, you know, later on they created a Messerschmitt, which was one of if not the first fighter jet with a jet engine, right? Not propellers. So, and then the V1 and the V2, I mean, they brought those out in World War, obviously in World War II, but after D-Day, so 1944. It's too late. It's too late. They spent so much energy on these like high-tech weapons. They lost the war. They lost it, period. Because it was a war of attrition. That is exactly the same thing that is happening now in Ukraine. It is a war of attrition. Who can produce more? Who can produce faster? Who has more money to produce? Or who can produce cheaper and therefore more in quantity? That's what a war of attrition is. You must grind the other side down till they're gone. Russia is winning that war right now. And it's winning it because of drones like this. Now, people say they are quote-unquote cheap. No. They are cheap to produce. What is the aim of this weapon? It's to win a fucking war. It's to kill people. I mean, it's very sad, you know. It's not a nice thing, but that is its aim, and it fulfills that goal at a much lower price. Now, obviously, they need electronics, you know, to make these things and produce these things. You'll have a lot of shortages. So, you know, people who claim that Russia can only operate because, you know, they have to smuggle in electronic chips from microwaves into Russia because, you know, the Russians are so dumb and primitive, like cavemen. They just don't have any microchips of their own. They must depend purely on the West. You do know where those chips are produced, right? The ones you're using in the West. They're next door in China, you dumbass. But okay. Anyway, so...
Даже эффективнее на расстояниях, будем говорить, ближней зоны, то есть он намного эффективнее.
There goes the Leopard.
Операторов ланцетов часто называют иксоводами из-за характерного расположения крыльев пилонов. У маленького дрона два одинаковых икса.
You see, that's very interesting, the way this works. They put it on a ramp. They put it on a ramp and it catapults it up. Now, incidentally, the ramp reminds me of the V1, right? This is the first. It's not a drone. It's not a drone, but it looks like a drone. It's like a tiny fighter jet, and it's the Vergeltungswaffe, right? So the V1 that the Germans produced in order to terrorize London. It is horribly inaccurate, terrible, right? Its guidance system is so primitive. Like, basically the way that they would do this is you would fire them from the coast of France, because it's very close to England. It's the channel is very small. You would predetermine the bombing location just by setting a timer for when the engine should be cut off, right? So you could just calculate, because of the speed that this goes. I think it could do 400 miles per hour, something ridiculous, right? So you could just calculate, well, how much time does this take to get to London? That's when we should cut off, right? So you do basically the speed divided by distance, and then you get the time. And these things, they would just fall randomly in London, and kill people. And they had a jet engine on them, and they were produced in Peenemünde, right at the top of Germany, on the coast, northern Germany. And my grandmother was actually hit by one of these in London, but she survived, thankfully. But the thing is that the Germans, they as I said, they started using this right after D-Day, so in June 6, 1944, and then they came out with the V2, which was made by von Braun, who then became director, Marshall Space Flight Center, NASA. Lead scientist on the moon program. Just casual Nazi. I've told you about Operation Paperclip, right? But let's not get too carried away. Let's focus on this. My point here is that it's eerily similar, right? With the ramp and everything. And the problem with the Germans is that they came out too late with this thing. The war was already lost in 1942. So, there's nothing they could have done anyway. But it does show you that when we're talking about the Lancet, this Russian drone, or the Shahed, which is the Iranian drone that Iran also supplied to Russia. Now the Iranians deny it, of course, but they helped the Russians out, and why not? Why is it okay for 50 countries to help Ukraine, but it's not okay for Iran to help Russia? Go to hell. So that drone is also cheap to produce. And they made fun of Russia. You remember they said, "Oh, look, the Russians, they don't have any money. They don't have the resources to build their own drones. They have to go begging they have to go beg the Iranians for drones, or they've gone to buy artillery shells from North Korea." Yeah, guess what? Those two things are winning the war right now. Drones and artillery shells. And Ukraine doesn't have enough. Not laughing now, are we? This is a very nasty business. It's a very nasty business. But, you corner a bear. This is what happens. But, let's just watch a bit more from this nice little report.
А вот это изделие для чего? Это уже для более дальней, и боевой заряд здесь больше. То есть это для очень специальных задач и очень далеко.
Создатель ланцетов – российский конструктор Александр Захаров. Это ему удалось наладить промышленное производство беспилотников, о которых сейчас говорят по всему миру.
Украинцы, понимая, что сейчас прилетит, разбегаются в разные стороны, а российский беспилотник точно попадает в...
The similarity, you can see them running away because, they hear the thing coming. With the V1, this thing, as I said, it had a predetermined timer and fuel. Okay, so the engine would cut off. You could hear it dying, right? So it sounds like a motorbike. The engine is turning off, and then it nosedives, and that's that short period of silence. Like, people in London would know they're about to get blown up, because that means that the engine's cut off and it's about to hit you. Very terrifying, So I've no doubt that these men here that were scattering were also terrified by the noise. Again, very nasty business, as I said.
Цель.
Популярность ланцетов затмила пресловутый Байрактар, который на Украине из-за российской системы ПВО оказался абсолютно бесполезным. Практически все турецкие беспилотники
Right, so he's mentioning Turkish drones. Turkey has been supplying drones to Ukraine, which is kind of an odd position because, Turkey and Russia have very good relations. They enjoy, a very fruitful bilateral relationship and trade and, and diplomatic and political relationship. And at the same time, Turkey is giving drones to Ukraine. But, he's talking about the electronic warfare system, which is a very, very important element. A lot of people, they think about war like, it's a bunch of, it's just bullets and guns and bombs. But one dimension, which is entirely related to the drones, is electronic warfare, jamming systems, and radar. Okay, so this is something that Russia just has mastered and is completely dominating Ukraine. Ukraine does not even stand a chance against Russia's electronic warfare and jamming and radar system. Not a chance. This is exactly why their drones are being shot down, as the presenter just noted. This is why, obviously when they hit the Kremlin, I mean, that's a one-off. It's a pretty good one-off, honestly. You got balls to do that. But, generally speaking, there's no comparison. The Russians have been developing this for years. Even the Lancet drone, which we're looking at now, they've used it in Syria, by the way, right, against the terrorists. So, Russians have a lot of experience doing this stuff. And in the United States, why is it different in the United States? Because in the United States, the companies that build the weapons are not interested in defense. They're interested in money. So they will make everything as expensive as humanly possible, right? And the United States is not in a situation of war anyway. I mean, not a war of attrition in any case. It is in Ukraine now, but again, I'm doing that segment in a moment. So my point here is that the Russians have worked out a very good strategy that is now being applied. And those people who were laughing at them are no longer laughing now, because this weapon is deciding the fate of the battlefield. I mean, for Jesus Christ, since the beginning of the war, they've been saying, oh, we need to give Ukraine this tank and this weapon. What's the point? What's the point? If you can destroy a Leopard tank, a Leopard, with a $35,000 drone, it's time to rethink your strategy.
Были сбиты в первый месяц военной операции, а ланцеты летают и каждый день поражают неприятельскую технику. Только в открытом доступе опубликовано около 400 подтвержденных поражений целей. Лучшей рекламы не придумать. Вот вы видите, как на этих кадрах ланцет
There we go, the S-300s I was telling you about. Take a look.
уничтожает сразу 2 установки С-300. Ракеты уже находились в пусковых контейнерах, поэтому фейерверк получился знатный.
I mean, I would cry, honestly. If those were my S-300s, I would cry. It's like just gone. Do you know how hard it is to get those things? Oh, what a disaster. What's the point of having an S-300 if you can't even shoot down a $35,000 drone? I mean, this is comical. This is really comical. I hope no one was inside, by the way, but this is insanely comical. It's so funny. It's like someone, it's like someone with a knife defeating, someone who has a bulletproof vest and a stab-proof vest and two, dual-wielding M60 machine gun. This is what it looks like.
Наш расчет за время проведения СВО уничтожил почти 90 единиц бронетехники. В Запорожской области поразили БУК уже заряженной ракетой. Еще был случай. Украинские военные спрятали зенитную установку ОСА в сарае. Мы это наблюдали с беспилотника-разведчика и тут же отправили в крышу ангара Ланцет.
Отличную цель для ланцетов представляют радары. Вот дрон «Камикадзе» попадает точно в радиолокационную станцию комплекса С-300. В результате ослеп целый дивизион из нескольких пусковых установок. А тут баражирующий боеприпас разносит в хлам американский радар антибатарейной борьбы.
I mean, we could be here all night looking at these videos. Hundreds of targets decimated. So, I mean, weapon systems that are so egregiously expensive, outrageously expensive, just gone in the blink of an eye because of these drones. So this is Russia's secret weapon, without a shadow of a doubt. This is deciding the fate of the war. There's no question about it. There is no question about it. the Russians have really perfected this, and as the Iranians have. And remember, I mean, Iran under sanctions, Russia under sanctions, but Iran, had to come a much longer way, right? Because Russia, again, was only really sanctioned, well, 2014, yes, but really started last year. So my point is that it's quite a miracle, and a show of immense, genius that they've been able to develop these things and do them so inexpensively while also being under sanctions. As I mentioned, it makes it harder to come by parts, whether they're spare parts or things that you need from scratch. It does make things more difficult, but you shouldn't underestimate your enemy. This is rule number one. Not just in Art of War, but I think everybody has heard this at one point. Never underestimate your enemy. This is what NATO have done. They've underestimated the Russians. And they really don't care whether, their tanks are being destroyed. You know why? Because they'll just sell new ones to the Ukrainians. Well, like I said, Ukraine is not really paying for them, except in blood. But when they say free military aid, there's no such thing as free. These tanks are sent after being bought from the private sector, from the weapons companies. So they're making money. If you're someone who produces European tanks, I mean, you'd be happy that the Iranians, the Iranian drones and Russian drones are destroying these tanks, because now you just get to sell more of them, right?